The truth has finally been revealed, and folks, it is way more delusional than anyone could have ever imagined. We've got breaking news that's going to blow your mind about Bo Bichette's contract demands. And trust me when I say this number is absolutely bonkers. Plus, the Yankees are now circling like sharks. The Blue Jays made multiple roster moves today. And the entire free agent market is starting to make a whole lot more sense once you understand what's really been going on behind closed doors. This is not a drill, people. Jon Heyman, one of the most respected insiders in all of baseball, just dropped an absolute bombshell that explains everything we've been wondering about Bo Bichette's stalled market. Why hasn't he signed yet? Why are teams seemingly hesitant to pull the trigger? Why has this process dragged on so long when we all thought Bo would be one of the first major free agents to come off the board? Well, now we know the answer. And it's a number so astronomical, so completely out of touch with reality that even the most optimistic Bo Bichette supporters are doing double takes and questioning whether this report can possibly be accurate. Are you ready for this? Take a deep breath, because what I'm about to tell you is going to change how you view this entire situation. According to Jon Heyman, Bo Bichette's asking price is thought to be around $300 million. That's right, you heard that correctly. $300 million. I actually snorted when I first read that number because it's so ridiculously high that my brain couldn't process it as real information. But here we are, and this is apparently what Bo and his representation are seeking as they negotiate with teams. Around baseball, let's just take a moment to let that sink in. Bo Bichette, who just turned 27 years old, who has battled injuries throughout his career, who plays defense at shortstop that can charitably be described as challenged, who would almost certainly need to move to second base on any team that signs him, is reportedly asking for $300 million. Not $200 million, not $250 million, $300 million. This report dropped just about half an hour ago, and baseball fans everywhere, not just Blue Jays fans, but fans of every team that's been linked to Bo are absolutely losing their minds trying to process this information. The reactions range from shock to disbelief to outright laughter, because that number is so far beyond what anyone expected that it seems almost like a negotiating tactic. It's designed to fail, but here's the thing. This actually explains so much about why Bo's market has developed so slowly. Teams aren't avoiding him because they don't value his talent. They're not passing on him because they have serious concerns about his ability to contribute. They're staying away because his asking price is so absurdly inflated that it makes zero sense for any rational front office to even consider meeting it. Think about it this way. The Toronto Blue Jays would obviously be willing to spend $300 million on the right player. That's superstar money. The kind of contract you give to a generational talent who's going to be the centerpiece of your franchise for the next decade. Would they spend that on Kyle Tucker? Absolutely, and probably without much hesitation. Tucker is a lefty-hitting outfielder who can hit for average and power, plays excellent defense, and has been one of the most consistently productive players in baseball over the past several seasons. But Bo Bichette at $300 million, that's a completely different conversation, and one that the Blue Jays apparently aren't interested in having. Rumors suggest that Tucker himself might only command somewhere in the $300 to $350 million range. And he's objectively the better player at this point in their respective careers. So why would any team pay Bo the same amount or close to it when they could spend that money on Tucker instead? This isn't meant to diminish Bo Bichette's accomplishments or disparage him as a player. He's been one of the best hitters in baseball when healthy, and there's no question he brings tremendous value to any lineup he's part of. But $300 million? For a player with his defensive limitations, his injury history, and his question marks about positional fit, that's not just aggressive negotiating, that's living in an alternate reality, where the baseball economics don't apply to you. Let's break down why this number is so problematic from multiple angles. First and foremost, we need to talk about Bo's defense at shortstop, because it's been a consistent issue throughout his entire career. According to defensive metrics, Bo posted a first percentile outs above average rating last season. Let me translate that for those of you who aren't stat nerds. First percentile means he was literally among the worst defenders in all of baseball at his position. Not just below average, not just poor, among the absolute worst. When you're paying a player $300 million, you expect them to be elite, or at least above average in all facets of the game. You can live with some defensive deficiencies if the bat is truly special and there are no other concerns. But when you combine questionable defense with an injury history that's caused him to miss significant time in multiple seasons, plus base running that has continued to decline according to advanced metrics, you're stacking up a lot of red flags that make that $300 million price tag seem absolutely insane. The reality is that Bo Bichette is really a second baseman at this point in his career, not a shortstop. Every team evaluating him knows this. The Blue Jays know this. Bo himself has acknowledged this by saying he's willing to move to second base for the right situation. But when you're a second baseman with defensive limitations rather than a shortstop, your market value drops considerably. Second base is a less premium position, and teams aren't going to pay shortstop money for a player who can't actually handle shortstop defensively now. Let's look at what the actual market value projections say about Bo Bichette, because this is where things get really interesting. According to SpotRock, which calculates market values based on previous contracts, future projections, and various other factors, Bo Bichette's fair market value is approximately 8 years and $186 million. That works out to about $23.3 million per year, which actually seems pretty reasonable for a player of his caliber. But if he's asking for $300 million, we need to figure out what kind of term that represents. Is it 10 years at $30 million per year? Is it 8 years at $37.5 million per year? Either way, you're talking about annual salaries that are significantly higher than what the market suggests he should command. If it's 10 years at $30 million annually, that's almost $7 million more per year than his projected market value. Over the life of a 10-year deal, that's $70 million more than what he should be getting. And if, God forbid, he's asking for 8 years at $300 million, that would be $37.5 million per year, which is just completely disconnected from reality. That would put him in the same salary stratosphere as the absolute elite superstars in baseball. And I don't think anyone would argue that Bo Bichette is on that level. Despite his obvious talents, let's look at some comparable players who've signed recent contracts at the shortstop and second base positions. Because context matters when evaluating whether $300 million is reasonable or ridiculous. Dansby Swanson signed a 7-year, $77 million deal with the Cubs. Trevor Story got 6 years and $140 million from the Red Sox. Turner landed an 11-year, $300 million contract with the Phillies. And Willie Adames just recently signed a 7-year, $182 million deal. Of these comparables, Willie Adames makes the most sense as a reference point for Bo Bichette. Adames got 7 years at $26 million per season. And when prospect evaluator Keegan Matheson came on various Blue Jays channels at the start of the offseason, he specifically mentioned Adames as a fair comparable for what Bo should expect. But even that deal is significantly less than the $300 million Bo is reportedly seeking. Now, some people will point to Trey Turner and say, see, shortstops can get $300 million. And yes, Turner did get that number. But let's be honest about the differences between Turner and Bichette. Turner was 29 when he signed, so slightly older than Bo, but still in his prime. More importantly, Turner had accomplished significantly more in his career to that point, including multiple All-Star appearances, strong postseason performances, and much better defensive metrics. Turner is also a significantly better defender than Bo and a better overall player when you evaluate all aspects of their games. This isn't about diminishing what Bo Bichette has accomplished during his time with the Blue Jays. He's been one of the best hitters in baseball when he's on the field. He's set multiple franchise records for shortstops. He's been a fan favorite and a central part of the Blue Jays core for years. But accomplishments alone don't justify a $300 million contract when there are serious questions about defense, injuries, positional fit, and overall value. The asking price also needs to be viewed through the lens of what else is available on the market. If you're a team deciding between spending $300 million on Bo Bichette or spending that same amount, maybe even a bit more on Kyle Tucker, who are you choosing? Tucker is a left-handed hitting outfielder who provides elite defense, consistent power, the ability to hit for average, and a track record of staying healthier than Bo. Most teams would choose Tucker in that scenario without much deliberation. This explains so much about why Bo's market has been moving at a glacial pace. It's not that teams don't value him, it's not that they don't recognize his talent. It's that his asking price is so far above what they consider reasonable that meaningful negotiations can't even get started. When there's $100 million gap between what the player wants and what the team is willing to pay, there's no real path forward until one side or the other dramatically changes their position. And now we have another fascinating wrinkle to this story. The New York Yankees are reportedly looking more seriously at Bo Bichette as their negotiations with Cody Bellinger continue to stall. According to John Heyman's report, the Yankees and Bellinger have exchanged multiple proposals but haven't been able to close the gap between what the player wants and what the team is willing to pay. Sound familiar? It's the same situation playing out with Bo and every team that's kicked the tires on him. If the Yankees can't reach an agreement with Bellinger, they're apparently prepared to pivot to Bo Bichette as their backup option. Now this is both nightmare fuel and potentially good news for Blue Jays fans, depending on how you look at it. On one hand, the idea of Bo going to your biggest division rival and terrorizing you for the next decade is absolutely brutal to contemplate. Bo has killed the Yankees throughout his career when facing them, and watching him do it in pinstripes would be painful for Toronto fans. On the other hand, if the Yankees are willing to pay Bo $300 million, at least Blue Jays fans can stand on the moral high ground knowing their team was never going to do something that financially irresponsible. If New York wants to hamstring themselves with an overpriced contract for a player with significant defensive and injury concerns, maybe that's actually good for Toronto in the long run. Bad contracts have a way of haunting teams for years, and $300 million for Bo Bichette has future albatross written all over it. The ideal scenario for Blue Jays fans at this point is probably the team landing Kyle Tucker, while Bo signs somewhere else, preferably in the National League, or at least outside the AL East. Getting Tucker gives you the superstar bat you need while avoiding the overpay that Bo's camp is demanding. And if Bo ends up with the Yankees at an inflated price, that's the Yankees' problem to deal with, not Toronto's. But if Bo does end up in New York, we'll all have to live with the reality that one of the most talented players in Blue Jays history is now wearing pinstripes and doing damage against his former team. That's going to sting. There's no way around it. The Vladimir Guerrero Jr. connection, the desire to win a championship in Toronto, all the emotional ties to the organization, none of that matters if the money isn't right and the Yankees are willing to pay what the Blue Jays won't. The Boston Red Sox are also lurking as another potential suitor who's been heavily linked to Bo throughout this process. If he's asking $300 million from them too, you have to wonder if they're any more willing to meet that number than Toronto or New York. The Red Sox have been notoriously reluctant to hand out massive long-term deals in recent years, particularly to players in their 30s. Would they make an exception for Bo? Maybe, but it seems unlikely at that price point. Here's what really stands out to me about this entire situation. If Bo Bichette is asking for $300 million, what in the world is Kyle Tucker asking for? Tucker is objectively the better player right now. He's a left-handed bat with elite power, excellent plate discipline, strong defense in a premium position, and a track record of durability that far exceeds Bo's. If Bo thinks he's worth $300 million, Tucker should be asking for $400 million by that logic. But the rumors suggest Tucker is only seeking somewhere in the $300 to $350 million range, which is either the same or marginally more than what Bo wants. That doesn't make any sense, unless you accept that Bo's asking price is completely detached from reality and represents an opening negotiating position that's designed to come down significantly before a deal actually gets done. Some of you reading this are probably thinking, but Bo has a pre-existing relationship with the Blue Jays. He wants to play with Vladdy. He wants to win a World Series in Toronto. Maybe he'd take a discount to make it work. And look, I hope that's true. I hope Bo values those intangibles and would be willing to sign for less than his asking price to stay in Toronto. But $300 million is such an absurd starting point that even if he comes down $50 or $75 million, we're still talking about a contract that doesn't make sense for the Blue Jays when Tucker is available. Bo Bichette is an absolute beast when he's healthy and locked in at the plate. Nobody disputes that. He's capable of carrying an offense for weeks at a time. He's got swagger and confidence that energizes his teammates. And he's been the face of this franchise alongside Vladdy for years now. But $300 million? It's for a player who can't play shortstop defensively, who's missed significant time with injuries in multiple seasons, and who would need to shift to second base on whatever team signs him. That's not being a savvy. Negotiator, that's being delusional about your market value. The truth has leaked, and now we understand why this process has taken so long. It's not because teams don't want Bo Bichette. It's because they don't want him at $300 million. And apparently nobody has been willing to tell him and his representation that they need to dramatically lower their asking price if they want to get a deal done before spring training. While we're all processing this bombshell about Bo's contract demands, the Blue Jays were busy today taking care of some housekeeping items and finalizing arbitration agreements with several key players. Let's run through these moves quickly, because they're important, even if they're not quite as dramatic as the Bo Bichette news. First up, Dalton Varsho officially avoided arbitration by agreeing to a one-year deal worth $10.75 million. That's actually $1 million more than what MLB trade rumors had projected for him, which makes sense when you consider how valuable his defense is. Sometimes the advanced analytics and projection models don't fully capture the worth of elite defense, and Varsho is one of the best defensive outfielders in baseball. The fact that the Blue Jays paid slightly more than projected to avoid arbitration is actually a good sign. It shows they value Varsho and wanted to keep the relationship positive rather than getting into a potentially contentious arbitration hearing. For those who might not be familiar with how arbitration works, let me give you a quick primer. When a player is arbitration eligible, they can either negotiate a contract directly with their team or go to an arbitration hearing where each side presents their case for what the player should be paid. The player's representatives argue for a higher number, the team argues for a lower number, and an independent arbitrator chooses one or the other. There's no splitting the difference. These hearings can get contentious because teams sometimes have to argue that their own player isn't as good as the player thinks he is, which can damage relationships by avoiding arbitration with Varsho. The Blue Jays maintained a positive relationship with a player they clearly value. And there's already speculation that before Varsho hits free agency after the 2027 season, the Blue Jays might try to lock him up with a longer-term extension. That's a conversation for another day, but the foundation for that potential deal is being laid right now by handling these arbitration situations professionally. The Blue Jays also avoided arbitration with Ernie Clement, agreeing to a one-year deal worth $4.6 million. Well, this is another case where keeping the relationship positive was clearly a priority. Clement was one of the heroes of the Blue Jays' playoff run, coming through with huge hits in clutch situations and providing elite defense at multiple positions. He's exactly the kind of player you want to keep happy because his versatility and production make him incredibly valuable, even if he's not a superstar. Paying Clement $4.6 million for next season is a bargain when you consider what he brings to the table. He can play second base, third base, shortstop, and even first base competently. His defense is elite at all those positions, ranking among the best in baseball by most metrics. And while he's not going to hit 30 home runs, he can be a productive offensive contributor who finally the Blue Jays avoided arbitration with Tyler Heineman at $1.237 million. This one is less significant from a roster construction standpoint since Heineman is a backup catcher. But it's still worth noting that the Blue Jays handled it professionally and got the deal done without any drama. The theme here is that the Blue Jays are taking care of business with their current players, maintaining positive relationships, and avoiding the kind of contentious arbitration hearings that can create friction between players and management. This is actually really important from a free agent recruitment standpoint too, because players around the league notice when an organization treats its players well and handles these situations with class. Remember last year when Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette both went through arbitration? There was some concern that the process might fracture those relationships, particularly if the hearings got ugly and the team had to make negative arguments about their own star players. Ultimately, it didn't cause any long-term damage with Vlad, but it created some uncomfortable moments that everyone would have preferred to avoid. By getting these deals done with Varsho, Clement, and Heineman before arbitration hearings were necessary, the Blue Jays are showing current and potential future players that they're willing to negotiate in good faith and pay fair market value without forcing everyone through an adversarial process. That's good business and smart organizational. It's management. But let's bring this all back to the elephant in the room. Bo Bichette wanting $300 million. Now that we know his asking price, everything else makes so much more sense. The Blue Jays weren't being cheap or uncommitted to bringing him back. They weren't prioritizing Kyle Tucker over Bo because they don't value what Bo brings to the team. They were simply being rational baseball executives who recognized that $300 million for Bo Bichette doesn't make financial sense when you evaluate his actual market value. If Bo comes down to a reasonable number, say 8 years at $200 million or something in that range, maybe the Blue Jays would have interest in bringing him back. But at $300 million, they're absolutely right to pursue other options and allocate those resources elsewhere. That's not being disloyal to a homegrown star. That's being smart about roster construction and financial management. The Yankees circling is fascinating because it tells us that other teams are at least willing to consider Bo even if they haven't committed yet. New York has deep pockets and a history of paying premium prices for star players. So maybe they'd be willing to get close to that $300 million number if they strike out on Bellinger and don't have other attractive options. But even the Yankees have their limits. In recent history shows, they've been more cautious about handing out massive long-term deals than they were in previous decades. For Blue Jays fans, this whole situation creates a fascinating dilemma. Do you want your team to bring back Bo at a reasonable price if he eventually lowers his asking price? Or would you rather see them pivot completely to Kyle Tucker or other options? If Bo goes to the Yankees and terrorizes the Blue Jays for years, will you regret not paying him what he wanted? Or will you be vindicated when the injuries pile up and the defensive liabilities become impossible to ignore? There's no easy answer to those questions because baseball is unpredictable in player development doesn't follow a linear path. Bo could stay healthy for the next decade and continue being one of the best hitters in baseball, making any team that signed him look brilliant. Or he could break down physically, struggle with the move to second base, and become an albatross contract at hamstrings, whichever organization gave him $300 million. What we know for certain is that the asking price of $300 million explains everything we've been wondering about over the past few weeks. Why hasn't Bo signed yet? Because he's asking for way more than teams think he's worth. Why haven't the Blue Jays been more aggressive in bringing him back? Because his demands are unrealistic, and they have better options for that money. Why is the entire free agent market moving slowly? Because major dominoes like Bo and Tucker need to fall before everyone else can finalize their plans. The truth is leaked, and it's wilder than anyone could have imagined. Bo Bichette wants $300 million. The Yankees are now seriously considering him, and the Blue Jays are apparently comfortable letting him walk if he won't come down to a reasonable number. This is going to be fascinating to watch play out over the coming weeks, and we'll be here covering every development as it happens. So here's what I want from you in the comments. Do you think $300 million for Bo Bichette is justified? Would you rather the Blue Jays pay that number to keep him, or spend it on Kyle Tucker instead? If you're a Yankees fan, do you want your team pursuing Bo at that price? And for fans of other teams that have been linked to Bo, does this asking price change how you feel about potentially signing him? Drop your thoughts below because I want to hear from everyone on this. This is one of the wildest contract demands we've seen in recent years. And the fallout is going to impact multiple teams and potentially reshape the entire free agent market. If you enjoyed this breakdown of Bo's insane asking price and all the implications it creates, smash that like button and help us reach more baseball fans who need to know what's really going on. Subscribe if you haven't already because we're tracking this story every single day and you don't want to miss any updates. Hit that notification bell so you're alerted the moment new information drops. Share this with your fellow baseball fans who've been wondering why Bo hasn't signed yet. Comment below with your predictions for where he eventually lands and what his final contract will look like. And stick with us because this offseason is far from over and we've got so much more to cover. The truth is out there now, folks. $300 million for Bo Bichette. The market is finally starting to make sense. And the Blue Jays are handling their business like a professional organization while everyone else figures out what they're willing to pay for a talented but flawed player. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.